Imagine opening your electricity bill today and realizing you're paying for a power plant that won't even be turned off until the year 2136. Welcome to your custom deep dive.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about.
It really is. Today we're unpacking a very passionate, story-driven commentary titled The True Nature of Electricity Bills That Bind the Future 100 Years from Now. And quick disclaimer before we get into the weeds here.
Right, the mandatory disclaimer.
Exactly. The sources we're looking at contain some highly charged political viewpoints regarding Japan's energy and nuclear policies. We are not taking sides here. We're just impartially reporting these ideas to convey the original material's narrative and, the passion behind it without endorsing any political side.
We're basically just mapping out this intense 100-year trap they describe, because the hook of this whole argument is that a silent policy reversal is secretly tying up our wallets and our physical safety for the next century.
So how does a century-long trap actually start? The text points back to the July 2022 GX executive meeting, which is, incredibly ironic since GX stands for Green Transformation.
Yeah, the irony is definitely thick there, because that specific meeting was a complete 180-degree pivot. They went from a policy of reducing nuclear reliance to suddenly maximizing it.
It feels a bit like boarding a flight to Hawaii, right? In midair, the pilot just silently changes the destination to Antarctica without telling anyone in the cabin.
Right. And to make that airplane analogy even worse, the passengers are now expected to pay for the new fuel, all while trusting a flight crew with a terrible safety record.
Right. This is that invisible structure of irresponsibility the text talks about.
Exactly. They argue the promised safety culture that we're sold is a complete illusion. I mean, they use the Noto Peninsula earthquake as a prime example.
Oh, yeah, where the roads were completely deceased.
Exactly. So the official nuclear evacuation plans were literally physically impossible to execute on the ground.
And then you add in that Chugu electric scandal they brought up, where seismic data at the Hamioka plant was just intentionally falsified.
Right, which completely shatters the entire foundation of trust. And the authors argue that if the physical safety net is compromised, well, the financial safety net is basically a direct attack on the public's wallet.
Okay, let's talk about the wallet part, because they heavily critique these decarbonization power source options. Wait, doesn't decarbonization mean green energy,
Yeah.
like solar or wind?
You would definitely think so on paper, yeah. If they're auctioning contracts for decarbonization, the money should build a renewable grid. But the sources claim this mechanism is essentially a massive labeling trick.
A trick? How so?
Well, private investors are refusing to finance massive, expensive legacy power projects anymore. The economics just don't make sense to them. So the government uses these auctions to collect funds, and roughly 80% of that money actually acts as a life support subsidy.
Wait, 80%? Just going directly to declining nuclear and fossil fuel industries?
Yeah, just to prop them up. They slap a green label on the fund to quietly bail out the old guard. And because building a new nuclear plant takes decades, one plant today won't finish its decommissioning cycle until 2136.
2136?
Yeah.
So we are literally forcing the 22nd and 23rd centuries to pay the hidden costs of decisions being made right now.
Yeah.
That really is a 100-year financial trap.
It is, but if the old concept of baseload power is chaining us to this financial black hole, the sources do offer a hopeful alternative.
Right. They talk about escaping it through a decentralized grid.
Yeah.
The global shift toward flexibility.
Exactly. Moving away from constant heavy generation and using things like community batteries and intelligent demand adjustment to offset grid strain.
And they bring the receipts for this, too. The Mitcham case study down in South Australia.
Mitcham is such a perfect test case for flexibility. They adopted a 100% renewable approach using a community battery system, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't destabilize their grid, and it certainly didn't bankrupt the city. They actually lowered electricity prices for their residents.
Which completely shatters the myth that a green grid is inherently too expensive or too unstable to maintain.
Totally. And that leads to the really passionate emotional appeal at the end of the commentary. They say to see is to understand, to know is to change.
Yeah, they're arguing that the future shouldn't be dictated by massive corporations or these silent policy shifts, but by informed citizens who actually look at the mechanics of their energy bill.
It requires a massive shift in perspective, moving from being a passive consumer of a huge grid to an active participant in a flexible one.
It really leaves you with something fascinating to ponder. If the survival and economic viability of the global power grid now relies entirely on this concept of flexibility, how might you and I need to radically flex and adapt our own daily energy habits to match it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Definitely something to keep in mind the next time you flip a light switch.